Hi everyone, my name is Vanessa Brown, and on September 5th, 2021, I released my first book online. It's called The Well-Traveled Cat, and I published it under the name of the cat in question, Jaime Brown. Jaime was my darling little cat who lived to almost 19 years old and traveled around the world with me. He lived with me in 5 countries, 3 of those countries with his brother before we lost him. And I wrote a memoir about his life, written from his perspective. And I'm currently writing mine, written from my perspective. So I decided to make a video of how to write a memoir. And this is how I wrote mine. Your process may be different. Other people's processes may be different. But I'm going to tell you how I wrote mine and how I achieved what I did. So when people find out that I wrote a book, they're very impressed. And they believe that it's an amazing achievement. And it is. Even if you write a bad book, it's still an incredible achievement, as it takes hours and hours of dedication and focus. And releasing it, especially if you do it on your own, as I did, you learn so much, and you have to do so much because you are a one-stop shop. From formatting the book, to designing the cover, to doing all of my own marketing, to finding my own digital provider. When you do everything, you have to learn so much more than you ever anticipated. So when you are writing a memoir, it is easier in the respect that you're writing about your own life often. And so you know everything that happened. Even if you're writing about someone else, like I did with Jaime, you know almost everything about the story. And so you don't really need to use your imagination to come up with characters and backstories and everything that went on, because it's right there for you in your memory. It does become tricky, however, when you are writing about real people, from descriptions to remembering dialogue and conversation. It can be really tricky to make sure that you don't offend anyone by the way that you portray them according to your own perception. So let's start at the beginning with the idea and the outline. Obviously, first you have to have the idea. And if you're writing a memoir about yourself, it's getting to the point in your life where you feel that you have a story that others may want to hear. I had been wanting to write The Well-Traveled Cat for many, many, many years, and I had a dear friend who pushed and pushed. And at the end of 2019, I had moved to Canada. I was very alone. It was before the pandemic really hit. And I started to write his story because I had the time to do it. And I continued to write it throughout 2020. When I thought of The Well-Traveled Cat, I thought, how do I break this book up? And what chapters should I put in here? Now, because Jaime lived with me in 5 countries, I just broke it up into 5 parts, each part named after the country that we were in. And then I did a basic outline of some of the chapter titles that came into my mind, many of which stayed until the final draft of the book. Now, others may have a different process, but at this point, I just started writing. And for me, this is the best part of the writing process. You just write. I just wrote. I did make corrections to any spelling or slight grammar as I wrote, but you don't do a lot of editing. You just get it out. And you write and you write and you write almost everything that you can imagine. And I just kept writing the story until I had his entire story written out. By the time I'd finished this part of the process, Jaime was still alive. And so I hadn't written the final chapter yet. Once I'd finished writing everything that I could think of, I then turned to Facebook. So I joined Facebook when I was still in New Zealand, beginning of 2007, and I really wasn't very active on it. It was new for me at the time. It was new for quite a few people, and I wasn't sure how it worked. However, after I moved to Australia, I started to use it more and more. And it became a great resource when I finally wrote his book. The good thing about Facebook is you can do a backup of Facebook with photos videos, and status updates. And so I did that, and I scrolled through all of the status updates that I had pertaining to Jaime and Joey, who was his brother, as well as to remember things that had happened in our lives. I took out a lot of my status updates and pasted them into the text chronologically, and I put them into bold, which meant that they were not part of the writing and they would need to be written into the story. After I finished looking at Facebook, I then went through all of my photos, and I used the photos to refresh my memory on some of the things that I had forgotten about. I also wrote little notes from those photos into the text in the book, also in bold, which meant it needed to be changed into actual narrative. As I had made a complete backup of Facebook, I also went through some selected messages from Facebook Messenger to try and remember exact details of things that had happened in both of our lives. I also went through a few text messages on my phone that were pertinent to his life. After I had collected all of this information, placed it into the text where it needed to go, I then went into my book to do the second run, and I changed all of the bold into narrative. I then went through and did my very first edit of the book. I have a dear family friend who lives in South Africa who very kindly offered to edit my book, as that is what she does. I sent it to her, and she edited it bit by bit. As I received the chapters back, I put her edits into my text, and within a few months, the book had had a very, very good and comprehensive edit. At this point, I also turned to her and said, please, could she give me some advice on the content, as she's such a kind person and wouldn't want to hurt my feelings by offering that advice. She then very kindly took one of my longest chapters and made notes of the things that I needed to add in. I'm a good storyteller, but when I write, I'm quite succinct. And there was a lot of details that I had just not even thought to put in because in my head, I knew them. For example, descriptions of homes, descriptions of people, dialogue. There was almost no dialogue in the book. And so she gave me so much guidance on how to fill it in. So I went back and I went through the text and I made bold comments again. This person needs a description. This home needs a description. This property needs a description. There needs to be more information here in this circumstance. We need some backstory for this that happened. Or insert dialogue here. After I had finished putting all of that into the book, I went through again and flushed all of the bold text out into narrative. That was my least favorite part of the book because that's the part that I'm not excellent at and isn't a natural thing for me to do. So that took some time, but eventually I finished it and I was very happy with the extra information I put in. It felt really good and it felt far more comprehensive. I then went through the third and fourth edit of the book. Eventually I decided enough was enough, and no matter how much I stared at this book or went through it, something in my mind would always need to change. Before I finished writing, I sent out proposals, so many proposals, to publisher after publisher after publisher, to agent after agent after agent. Now, after reading a few forums online, there seems to be a general consensus that agents don't necessarily want to work with new writers. It's not an immediate market. It's not an immediate sale of books. And going with celebrities or with renowned authors is so much easier. And I got quite disillusioned sending out proposal after proposal after proposal. So much so that I basically didn't touch the book again for a very long time. I finished my final write at the end of November 2020, and I only did something with that book again in July of 2021. I'd arrived in Mexico, and I decided that it was time for me to release this book into the world and to take matters into my own hands. So I downloaded a free program called GIMP, and I created the cover. I then did a lot more research to figure out what else I needed to do. I registered the domain name, thewelltraveledcat.com, and I created the website. I used to be a website designer, and while my skills are not the same anymore, I was able to create a fairly decent WordPress site. I went onto Reddit, asked some questions, and found out where the best distributor would be. So I used Draft to Digital. They give you a lot of help in formatting your book and uploading it to the system so that it can be created as an EPUB or a PDF for the sellers. But before that, I had formatted the entire manuscript in a way that looked like a book from the store. I had taken a few library books out, and I looked through them to see the way that they had been formatted, how they'd written their acknowledgements, and how they'd laid it out. And I did the same thing. Of course, once you upload it into a digital system, you then ruin a little bit of your formatting. So I had to go in and create a separate manuscript for the digital environment. While I was in Cancun in Mexico, I also did a very, very final edit. I sent up a little prayer and finished the manuscript in its entirety and uploaded it to the system. I set a release date that had significance to me, and I started working on some marketing. I created an Instagram page for Jaime, and I uploaded one new picture every day so that when somebody read the book, they could get a good visual reference for that event or occasion or time. I used my own YouTube channel, International Immigrant, which is where you're watching this video, to also do a countdown towards the book. And when the book was released, I did a video showing how you can navigate around the Well Traveled Cat website and find out where you can buy the book. I hope that this video has been helpful to you. If you have any other questions about how to write a memoir or about my process, please, by all means, leave them in the comments section or send me a message on Instagram. I'd be more than happy to help you out and to answer any questions you may have. Thank you for watching. Please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button for this video, and I'll see you all soon.